안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕코입니다. 운동하겠습니다.
The NBA has had a decades-long history of being involved in social justice and inclusion, and they finally decided that they wanted to do something a little bit more prominent, in the public. So they wanted to name a social justice award, and they named it after me. I'm very flattered that they would pick me, and very happy to be involved. There are a lot of Black Americans in the NBA. This is no secret. And Black Americans have a lot of issues here in America. So the fact that the NBA is willing to let us speak our minds that's a good thing. We have to change these. We have to change these things, and it takes a commitment.
When Hublot smashed into the watch world in 2004, it really left a crater hole that has never quite seen the industry recover. This was such a bold, brash, and incredibly brazen take on watchmaking. The Big Bang was the product that launched this ship with a vengeance. These were big, brash, unapologetic watches with all kinds of riveted bezels and large dimensional pushes on the side. This was a watch that, again, was not steeped in tradition. It was creating an entirely new personality and boldness. All of this was brought to the brand by the new owner, Jean-Claude Biver, one of the most electric, energetic, and controversial figures in the watch industry. It's hard to think of any other watch brand that's had that much impact on such a conservative industry.
He's interviewed 5 U.S. presidents, authored 7 books, and has an independent voice that resonates.
What happened to when we were united against a common enemy?
He's raw, unique, and one of America's most important talk show hosts. Watch Smirconish, Saturday on CNN.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing. Do you get the anger that is out here? How concerned are you about the front line? You don't believe that there's a racial divide here. Looking back, as president, did you tell the story of race in America enough, do you think? All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're part of what I do right here, holding the powerful accountable. Keeping them honest.
AC 360, Tuesday through Saturday only on CNN.
Well, a battle is certainly brewing over one of the world's great natural wonders and one of its most delicate and diverse ecosystems. The UNESCO committee is recommending that the Great Barrier Reef be listed as in danger due to climate change. But Australia is strongly opposed, saying it spent billions of dollars to protect the reef, and the country is appealing that recommendation. Ivan Watson is following this from Hong Kong. Ivan, hi. Why is Australia pushing back on this?
Yeah, this is unusual, kind of a government like Australia taking aim at UNESCO, with the Environment Minister of Australia accusing UNESCO of a backflip and of surprising the Australian government by trying to proposing to put the Great Barrier Reef on a list of endangered World Heritage Sites. I think that everybody agrees that the Great Barrier Reef is a treasure. It's nearly 350,000 square kilometers in size, a marine habitat, immensely rich and diverse, bigger than Italy, and it has been on the World Heritage list since 1981, but its incredible coral forests have been dying due to the rising temperatures of the ocean. There were bleaching events in 2016, 2017, and 2020 that were killing off huge amounts of the coral and the habitat for all the marine life there. The UNESCO has downgraded the health of the Great Barrier Reef from poor to very poor, and Australia has been working with UNESCO to try to preserve it. It's invested money in it, but evidently the Australian government does not like a formal endangerment categorization of the Great Barrier Reef, such that the Environment Minister and the Foreign Minister of Australia called the Director General of UNESCO and complained about it, and went on to say, quote, "I made it clear that we will contest this flawed approach, one that has been taken without adequate consultation. I agree that climate change is the single biggest threat to the world's reefs, but it's wrong in our view to single out the best managed reef in the world for an in danger listing." Environmental groups, though, have welcomed UNESCO's proposal, and some of this has to do with this kind of tension in the Australian government. It's trying to save this environmental treasure, but it is also a country that exports some of the most coal in the world, and those exports are expected to grow over the next 5 years, and that directly contributes to global warming, to climate change, which is helping kill this treasure. Robin.
Okay, thanks for that. Ivan Watson, live in Hong Kong. Thank you, Ivan. Student athletes have just won a huge victory at the US Supreme Court. The justices say they deserve more than a free education for their services, and the decision wasn't even close. As Jessica Schneider now reports. Jessica.
This unanimous ruling from the Supreme Court will allow schools to give money to athletes for education-related expenses beyond the free tuition and room and board that they already get, including things potentially like computers or even scholarships for postgraduate study, or maybe even paid internships. So even though these aren't direct cash payments or salaries for student athletes, this does amount to a tremendous breakthrough in the long-running fight to get student athletes paid. And what's especially interesting here is the concurrence written by conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh. He talks about the fact that he believes the fight here is far from over. He says there are serious questions about other restrictions the NCAA places on students making money, and he slammed the organization's justification for those restrictions because the NCAA has argued that paying athletes would dilute their amateur status. They even say fans prefer student athletes not get paid, but in the majority opinion, they said there wasn't much evidence for that assertion. So Justice Kavanaugh writing, "Nowhere else in America can businesses get away with agreeing not to pay their workers a fair market rate on the theory that their product is defined by not paying their workers a fair market rate. And under ordinary principles of antitrust law, it is not evident why college sports should be any different. The NCAA is not above the law." Justice Kavanaugh there pushing back on this idea that tradition and history should hamper the right of student athletes to at least get some compensation, especially when the NCAA and the colleges and the coaches are making millions and millions of dollars every year. The NCAA issued a statement saying, while today's decision preserves the lower court ruling, it also reaffirms the NCAA's authority to adopt reasonable rules and repeatedly notes that the NCAA remains free to articulate what are and are not truly educational benefits consistent with the NCAA's mission to support student athletes. But 6 states, they're taking matters into their own hands. On July 1st, they'll allow student athletes to profit off their name, image, and likeness. And then there's California. That has a law set to take effect in 2023 that will allow athletes to sign endorsement deals. Jessica Schneider, CNN, Washington.
Well, the sports world reacts to an NFL player's coming out, plus a stunning upset in the Euro 2020 tournament. Don Riddell has our Minute in Sports.
Carl Nassib's historic announcement that he is gay, making him the first actively gay NFL player, has drawn praise and love from all corners of the sports community. The NFL Commissioner, Roger Goodell, said, quote, "The NFL family is proud of Carl for courageously sharing his truth," while the tennis icon Billie Jean King tweeted, quote, "The ability to live an authentic life is so important. Representation and visibility matter." The delayed Olympic Games are now just over a month away, and the organisers in Tokyo have announced that fans will be allowed to watch the action. Despite warnings from health experts about the perils of the coronavirus pandemic, local fans will be allowed into the arenas, but attendance will be capped at 50% capacity, or a maximum of 10,000 people. Meanwhile, the Games will be historic because a transgender athlete will be competing for the first time. New Zealand has selected the 43-year-old weightlifter Laurel Hubbard to compete. She will also be the oldest lifter at the Games. And it was a day of really high emotion at the European Football Championships, where Denmark's 4-1 win against Russia carried them into the knockout round. The Danes were playing 9 days after their star player Christian Eriksen had to be revived from cardiac arrest on the field. It still seems like a miracle that he survived. Neutral fans all over the world will be rooting for Denmark. Back to you.
So social media influencer in Maine is paying it forward to help youth in the LGBTQ community. Meredith Steele heard about a local waiter who's openly gay and was stiffed for tips multiple times. On one occasion, diners left a church pamphlet instead. Steele is no stranger to gifting large amounts of money collected from her hundreds of thousands of online followers. She knew this was a perfect opportunity to do it again, but Steele ended up collecting more than expected, so she and the waiter decided to share the wealth.
When I gave the server his gift, I said to him, I'd really like to use a portion of this to donate to Equality Maine. And they have a camp for teens, and the server was like, this is awesome, this is definitely something I support.
Using the remaining money, Steele is sending 40 LGBTQ youth to a week-long leadership camp. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to connect with me on Twitter and on Instagram at Robin Kerno CNN. Early Start is up after this short break.
We live in such a fast-paced world where the news has been so relentless. Historic events have happened one after the other. I think that you need that daily appointment with viewers around the world to try and sort through the news of the day. What's important? Why does it matter to me? How do I put it all in context? We follow the news as it happens and where it happens. And then we also take a step back to walk the viewer through the day's news. That is the mission of Halagarani tonight.
The election is rigged. Fight like hell.
Now, new details from those who were there.
President Trump said, come to D.C. It's going to be wild.
He was anointed by God, Donald Trump. Yeah.
Oh my God, what is happening? CNN special report, Assault on Democracy, the roots of Trump's insurrection, Saturday on CNN.
To understand Italy, you need to look at the food. I'm here to discover how it's the food of ordinary Romans that has conquered our hearts.
That is delicious.
Stanley Tucci, Searching for Italy, Sunday on CNN.
This is the 100 Club, our look at companies that are 100 years old or older. Across the lush bluegrass pastures and limestone-bedded forests of central Kentucky, one name reigns supreme.
Dear baby.
It's almost like a pilgrimage for some folks who are very loyal fans, come from all over the world to see where their Jim Beam bourbon's made.
Fred No is master distiller. For him, Bourbon is a family business, and the bloodlines trace all the way back to 1795 when Jacob Bean sold the first barrel.
You know, Jacob Bean started off making just a little bit of whiskey, maybe 1 barrel a day if he was lucky.
Bourbon is now an $8.5 billion industry in the U.S. state of Kentucky, where 95% of the world's bourbon is made.
I'm Ivan Watson in Hong Kong, and this is CNN.
New York City heads to the polls today, local politics with national implications.
Democrats hope for a unified front today, a big test ahead for voting rights. What happens when it fails?
And for the first time in NFL history, an active player says he's gay. Why he chose to speak out now. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and all around the world. This is Early Start. I'm Laura Jarrett.
Good morning, Laura. Good morning, everyone. I'm Christine Romans. It is Tuesday, June 22nd. It is 5 a.m. exactly in New York. And today, voters in New York City head to the polls for a crucial primary election, one that doubles really as a referendum on the crime spiking across the country just as the pandemic begins to ease. Murders, shootings, hate crimes, all up significantly as New York City reopens from COVID-19, a situation mirrored in other cities, big and small.
In the wide open Democratic field, these are the 4 considered top candidates: Brooklyn Borough President and former police officer Eric Adams, former Sanitation Commissioner Catherine Garcia, and recent presidential candidate Andrew Yang, who, by the way, teamed up over the weekend in an effort to slow Adams' momentum. And there's also civil rights lawyer Maya Wiley, the consensus pick of New York progressives.
Today marks the end of a wild and heated campaign, but don't expect results anytime soon. More from CNN's Athena Jones.
Good morning, Christine and Laura. Today is primary day in what's being called the most significant election in New York City in a generation. 13 candidates are vying for the Democratic nomination in the race for mayor, and whoever wins is heavily favored to win the general election in November. The next mayor faces a difficult task of leading a city emerging from a pandemic-induced economic crisis. And with voters ranking public safety issues like crime on the street and in the subway system at or near the top of their list of concerns, the candidates' plans for how to combat rising crime have been a big focus in recent weeks. Today is also the first big test for ranked choice voting, a new method that allows voters to rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference. It means that if, as expected, no one candidate wins more than 50% of the vote of first choice ballots, the candidate with the least support is eliminated. Those votes reallocated to those voters' second choice candidates. The process continues until someone wins a majority of votes. But we're all going to have to be patient as we await the results. The Board of Elections plans to release the first choices of early and in-person votes on election night, but won't start the ranked choice tabulation process for another week. Starting July 6th, the board will run the ranked choice count weekly, including absentee ballots that have been validated since the prior round, until a winner is determined. That could take weeks. Christine, Laura?
All right, Athena, thank you so much for that. With gun violence on the rise, California's decades-old ban on assault weapons will remain on the books for now. A federal appeals court has blocked a controversial ruling that had overturned the state's ban on assault-style weapons earlier this month. That judge, Roger Benitez, remember, compared the AR-15 to a Swiss Army knife. California's Attorney General says the state's current laws will stand while the legal battle goes on.
A defensive lineman for the Raiders makes NFL history, becoming the league's first active player to announce publicly that he's gay. Andy Scholes has more on the landmark moment. Andy, it's kind of amazing. It's 2021 and we're still having this conversation, but here we are.
And that's what a lot of people are saying, Laura. Hopefully in the future we won't have to have this as a big news story. But Carl Nassib, he's going into his 6th season in the NFL, second with the Las Vegas Raiders, and he made his announcement on Instagram yesterday during Pride Month.
I just want to take a quick moment to say that I'm gay. I've been meaning to do this for a while now, but I finally feel comfortable enough to get it off my chest. I'm a pretty private person, so I hope you guys know that I'm really not doing this for attention. I just think that representation and visibility are so important. I actually hope that one day videos like this and the whole coming out process are just not necessary. But until then, I'm going to do my best and do my part to cultivate a culture that's accepting, that's compassionate.
Nassib also saying he's donating $100,000 to the Trevor Project, which is a non-profit organization that provides crisis intervention and aims to prevent suicide within the LGBTQ youth community. Now, reaction just pouring in from all over the sports world, praising Nassib for having the courage to make this announcement. JJ Watt tweeting, "Good for you, Carl. Glad you feel comfortable enough to share, and hopefully someday these type of announcements will no longer be considered breaking news." NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, meanwhile, saying in a statement, the NFL family is proud of Carl for courageously sharing his truth today. Representation matters. Now, many NFL players have come out as gay after their careers were over. Michael Sam became the first openly gay player to be drafted into the NFL in 2014, but he was cut without ever playing a regular season game in the league. And Laura Nassib, in his post, also noted that studies have shown it only takes one accepting adult to decrease the risk of an LGBTQ youth committing suicide by 40%. So Nassib really hopes that by making this announcement, he's going to end up changing lives around the world.
That is a staggering and depressive stat, but as you said, and as he said, representation does matter. Andy, there was also another big piece of sports news yesterday, and this one at the U.S. Supreme Court, the justices ruling against the NCAA opening a door for a significant increase in compensation for student athletes, something they've been asking for a while. So what's the reaction been like?
Well, you know, this is long overdue in many people's eyes, Laura. You know, and anytime all 9 justices of the Supreme Court rule against you, it's pretty clear what you were doing and saying wasn't right. And that's what happened to the NCAA here. And this decision really opens the door to be used as a precedent in future cases. The Supreme Court upholding a district court's judge's decision that the NCAA was violating antitrust law by placing limits on the education-related benefits that schools can provide to athletes. So that means the NCAA can't restrict how much schools can give in terms of things like computers, graduate scholarships, and paid internships. Justice Brett Kavanaugh hammering the NCAA in his opinion, saying, nowhere else in America can businesses get away with agreeing not to pay their workers a fair market rate on the theory that their product is defined by not paying their workers a fair market rate. And under ordinary principles of antitrust law, it is not evident why college sports should be any different. The NCAA is not above the law. Now, this decision did not have anything to do with whether college players can make money off their name, image, and likeness. That decision looms as many states continue to pass legislation making it illegal for the NCAA to prevent athletes from making money. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the ruling, it's a victory for the efforts of student athletes.
Our view is that, of course, NCAA student athletes work very hard, both on the athletic field and in the classroom. I'm a retired one myself, and today's decision recognizes that, as with all Americans, their hard work should not be exploited, and the president believes that everyone who works should be compensated fairly for his or her labor.
Yeah, Psaki was a member of the swim team when she attended William and Mary. And, you know, Christine, this isn't like going to be an immediate thing where college players and athletes are getting paid right away and it's going to change. But it really is the start of a big change in college athletics. We're not going to really see the NCAA as it was before. They're not going to be able to police these schools and keep them from not offering fair compensation to these athletes. Big decision. It's going to be just the beginning of many more to come.
Yeah, we've been debating about this for years, and now here you go. The Supreme Court, they're ruling on it unanimously. Nice to see you. Thanks, Andy.
All right.
Later today, the Senate will hold a key test vote on a sweeping bill tackling voting rights, election reform, and government ethics. The measure not expected to pass, but Democrats are holding it anyway as a chance to showcase solid support within their party and to highlight a clear contrast with Republicans. Former President Obama gave a powerful endorsement of the bill Monday, invoking the Capitol insurrection to make his point.
The violence that occurred in the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, just a few months ago, should remind us that we can't take our democracy for granted. Around the world, we've seen once vibrant democracies go into reverse, locking in power for a small group of powerful autocrats, business interests, and locking out the political process, dissidents and protesters and opposition parties, and the voices of ordinary people. It is happening in other places around the world, and these impulses have crept into the United States. We are not immune from some of these efforts to weaken our democracy. In the aftermath of an insurrection, with our democracy on the line, and many of these same Republican senators going along with the notion that somehow there were irregularities and problems with legitimacy in our most recent election, they're suddenly afraid to even talk about these issues and figure out solutions on the floor of the Senate. They don't even want to talk about voting. And that's not acceptable.
So the big question for today's vote is whether all Democrats will be on board. That includes Senator Joe Manchin, who has said he can't support the For the People Act in its original form, but he has offered a substitute. That includes mandating voter ID and giving state and local election officials more authority to update their voter rolls. That plan does have support from Stacey Abrams, by the way, a key voice on voting rights, of course. The big cliffhanger here is whether Democrats will try to change the filibuster. That's, of course, the 60-vote requirement to end debate to pass most bills, which Senator Manchin and other Democrats have objected to gutting despite pressure from some progressives.
All right, America post-pandemic, heading into the best of times and the worst of times. What a spike in violence and economic obstacles mean for a post-COVID America.
We are in this space not just to have a product on shelf in a category that is growing healthy. We are in this space to make the world better, to make something that is designed for human beings and better for the planet. And that's the distinction between us and many of our competitors. That's the reason why we go to work, why we wake up, you know. That reason is so articulated within our company, and that is something we're determined to lead over time. Just look at the science that we have behind us, the multiple clinical studies that we made, and the research around agriculture. I mean, it's solid. And it's 25, 30 years of experience behind that. So it's been a long journey here, but we've been persistent. We've been there. We never diverted for our original idea and the reason for being as a company, you know.